pour argenter la petite nation, we'll be singing the national anthem.
Ô Canada, terre de nos aïeux, ton front est ceint de fleurons glorieux, à ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix, ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on God for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on God for thee.
What a voice. Let the doors be open. Que l'on ouvre les portes. And we'll start with statements by members. Déclaration de député, the Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in the spirit of the season, 'twas just weeks before Christmas, and in this very room, members are speaking, debating by Zoom. The Speaker keeps order, reducing dispute with up-to-date rulings. Minister, I think you're on mute. We zoom into kitchens, seeing babies and props. Our newest granddad and Prince George is the tops. Our stockings are hung by the chimney with care in hope that vaccines soon will be there. Fiscal anchors and guardrails weigh down Santa's sled, but this too shall pass. Sunny days are ahead. 2020's been a bad year, no one can deny. We want to say Merry Christmas. At least we can try. We know we are best when we speak from our heart. Next year must be better if we all do our part. So stay in your bubble, keep your distance at school, and God bless us all through Hanukkah and Yule. Joyeux Noël, Merry Christmas.
Here. The Honourable Member for Markham-Stouffville.
Mr. Speaker, I was delighted to learn that one of my constituents in Markham-Stouffville, Brian McFarlane, has been appointed to the Order of Canada, one of our country's highest civilian honours, for his contributions to the sport of hockey as a sportscaster, writer and historian. Brian McFarlane has had a distinguished career. Born in New Liskeard, Ontario, he attended university on a hockey scholarship where he scored record numbers of goals. After graduation, he worked in television and radio, including CFTO and CFRB in Toronto. One of the most recognizable voices in the game, for 26 years, he served as a host and commentator on Hockey Night in Canada, and he's written over 90 books on hockey, and in 1995, he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. I want to extend my congratulations to Mr. McFarlane and to thank him for all he's done for Canadians and for Canada's game.
The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize a few exceptional residents of Bruce and Grey County. Over the past year, I had the honor of serving with the outgoing wardens of both Bruce and Grey County, Mitch Tewin and Paul McQueen. I think both of them didn't foresee the circumstances that COVID-19 would bring and the challenges, but they both rose to the occasion and did tremendous work. I want to thank them and their families for the sacrifices in their service over this past year on behalf of my fellow MPs from Huron-Bruce and from Simcoe Grey, but more importantly on behalf of all residents of Bruce and Grey counties. I'd like to welcome the new wardens, Janice Jackson for Bruce County and Selman Hicks for Grey County. I'm confident that they're both going to carry on the great work of their predecessors. I look forward to working with them, and I'm sure that they will rise to the occasion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to congratulate the Black Business Institute in my riding of Halifax on 25 remarkable years of service to Nova Scotia. Since 1996, BBI has been a champion for our province's Black business community. Through mentorship and counseling, networking, marketing, and outreach activities, as well as loan and equity lendings, BBI supports Black-owned businesses to get started, grow, and overcome systemic challenges they face along the way. BBI also has a strong record of engaging Black and other marginalized youth, 8 to 35 years old, to become active, creative, and successful members of the business community through initiatives like their wildly successful Businesses Jammin' program. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members in this House to join me in offering my profound gratitude to the Black Business Institute for a quarter century of service to Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Is interpretation not working?
Is it working now? En français? C'est correct?
Is it working? The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to mention today a community organization in my riding, Le Bouc Humanitaire, which has created a warming station for our homeless this winter. Led by Rachel Lapierre, these volunteers have fought all year against the pandemic. They organize a service to call seniors and are offering grocery deliveries and meals. It was recently honored at our Chamber of Commerce's Zenith Gala. My team and I are proud of the hard work of these volunteers, and we will always continue to encourage our organizations. I would like to thank all inhabitants of Saint-Hippolyte, Saint-Jérôme, Prévost, Sainte-Sophie for all of their generosity. And I would wish each and every one of us a good Christmas and a 2021 full of love, health, peace, and solidarity. Thank you. The honourable member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, since March 2020, we've been facing an unprecedented challenge. A pandemic that has affected millions of people in the world. Despite everything, we have been strong and resilient. 2020 has not been a simple, easy year, to say the least. For the residents of my riding Bourassa and for all Canadians, the holidays will be very different this year. We need to find new ways to celebrate together at a time when we are far apart from each other. However, there is hope on the horizon. Soon, we will be able to see our family and loved ones again and begin our activities once more.
Pleased to wish you happy holidays. Mon équipe et ma famille.
My team, my family, and I are pleased to wish you happy holidays.
Joyeuses fêtes. Merci.
The honourable member for Barrie-Innisfil.
That 2020 has been a year like no other. So many have sacrificed so much, and with Christmas coming, there's no shortage of people and groups in our communities of Barrie and Innisfil who are stepping up to assist those in need. I want to acknowledge the Barrie and South Simcoe Police Services, the Simcoe County Paramedics, the Barrie and Innisfil Fire and Emergency Services. Not only have they been on the front lines of pandemic response, they're also responding by collecting toys for Christmas Cheer and Toy Mountain and other causes around the region. And after the collections are complete, many of these men and women will be on duty protecting us. Let's also be thankful for the frontline healthcare workers, PSWs, those who work in seniors' homes and LTC centers who will be working over the holidays as well. Finally, an ask. The demand for service from both food banks in Barrie and Innisfil have increased because of the pandemic. If you can, please support them with a donation of money or grocery cards. From my family to yours, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and I wish you all a happy, prosperous, and healthy 2021.
The honourable member for Central Nova.
Mr. Speaker, I want to share with you an extraordinary act of bravery involving a local air cadet, Warrant Officer First Class Haley White from my hometown of Pictou County, Nova Scotia. While on her way to cadets, Warrant Officer White witnessed a serious motor vehicle accident and immediately stopped to help those involved. Upon assessing the scene, she discovered that one of the vehicles was on the way to the local hospital with a female passenger who was in labor. The driver of the vehicle was unconscious but breathing. The driver of the other vehicle in the collision was not breathing at all. Without hesitating, Warrant Officer White leapt into action and began performing CPR on one of the drivers until paramedics arrived in the scene. They later advised Warrant Officer First Class White that it was her quick thinking and action that saved a life. In true Nova Scotian fashion, after getting home, she changed her muddied clothes and made it to cadets on time. I want to extend my sincere gratitude to Warrant Officer First Class White. Your quick thinking, fortitude under pressure, and first aid training provided through the cadets made all the difference. I know I can speak for every member of the House of Commons when I see we need more people like you in the world. Well done, Haley. You are an absolute hero.
The honourable member for the honourable member, la députée de...
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow will be the last day of the 16-day period of activism against gender-based violence. But violence against women does not only last 16 days, and it should never happen at all. This 16-day period enables us to fight to end that violence. I myself was at university when the Polytechnique massacre occurred. That date still stands out to me. A lot has been done since then, but there is still so much more to be done, and so many more struggles to win. I've been taking time to talk to organizations which assist women who are facing violence, like La Parolière, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary. I'd like to mention the remarkable work of Christine Poulin and Michel Comtois. Our government gave more than $40,000 to l'Escale and the Sherbrooke Calax to support just such shelters so that our daughters can take their place in safety. Let us continue down this path, Mr. Speaker. Happy holidays.
For Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister likes to say that you don't need an AR-15 to hunt deer. In showing us how much he doesn't know, AR-15s were restricted. They were only allowed to be used at a range. But why would the Prime Minister start letting facts about firearms get in his way now? He's gone on to say that they are designed to kill the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time and that they have no place in Canadian society. Also not true. If anything, that would be fully automatic firearms with high-capacity magazines, and they've been banned for decades. But despite the Prime Minister's misinformed justifications, apparently the Liberal government in the Yukon believes that AR-10s, which the PM also banned, are a good choice for wildlife management. They purchased these rifles for their conservation officers to make sure they had the tools they need to keep their officers safe. Meanwhile, the Liberals in Ottawa are preparing to spend billions of dollars to confiscate these same firearms from Canadians who have always used them safely, responsibly, and in accordance with the law. When will this Liberal government stop targeting law-abiding firearms owners and focus on violent criminals instead?
The honourable member for Brampton West.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to wish my constituents in Brampton West and all Canadians a very happy holiday season. This year presented unique challenges, perhaps the greatest challenge of our generation. In one way or another, we have all been impacted. We have all made sacrifices, and for some of us have lost a loved one this year, perhaps the greatest loss of all. As we reflect on where we are and how we got here, resiliency and optimism stand out as core values of Canadians in the face of adversity. Together as a nation, we have made it this far. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and we are very close, and we can soon take pride in the sacrifices we made to protect each other. This holiday season, take care of yourself, reach out to your loved ones, and let's get through this last hurdle together. While the holidays may not be the same this year, 2021 brings with it a renewed hope for better days ahead. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton-Wetaskiwin.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday Alberta announced additional steps to tackle the growing COVID-19 crisis. Most of us are not medical experts. We rely on people we trust to guide our decisions as we do our very best to keep those we love safe and healthy. Those who are medical experts are nearly unanimous. This virus is extremely serious. The increasing numbers of deaths and of Albertans in hospitals, and particularly ICUs, reinforces this and represent a formidable challenge to our collective health. To my friends and family in Alberta, over the next 28 days, we will not be able to come together in person. Yet we must be united like never before. To the extent that you can afford to, support your local businesses and charities. Order takeout from your favorite local restaurants. Teach someone to use technology to help them stay connected. Be kind, be safe, and most importantly, be available virtually for people who need help. Our challenge is significant, but it is nothing compared to our commitment to one another.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, many Canadians are going into Christmas not knowing whether they'll be able to put gifts under the tree. Many families across the country face this challenge every year, but with the pandemic, even more will feel that pain. That's why I'm proud of the work Oshawa's Rotary Clubs did this week in organizing the first Oshawa Rotary Christmas tree sale. Members of the community were able to purchase a tree, with all proceeds going to support many community projects. In addition, some customers even opted to donate their tree to one of Oshawa's local community services, so that those who can't afford a tree this year will have one this Christmas. Oshawa has proven that it's the tough times that make us reach out to those in need, and Rotarians embrace that tradition. That's why I'm a proud Rotarian. I want to thank all Rotarians, especially Emmy Ahim and Susan McKinnon, for partnering in this initiative. Because of their tireless work, families across Oshawa will be able to experience the magic of Christmas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merry Christmas to all, and happy 2021.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Even before the pandemic, gendered violence was already a national issue. Red Women Rising, the Missing Murder Indigenous Women Inquiry, and the TRC all identify the need to protect the safety of women and girls through safe housing and spaces as paramount to ending violence. Yet little has been done. The unconscionable violence faced by women in the downtown East Side is rising. Imagine your daughter being sexually assaulted in broad daylight and no one intervened. Imagine your mother giving birth to a baby in a porta potty and no one noticed. It should shock you to your core that such incidents have happened. We cannot let such brutal violence to be normalized like this. There is no question that violence experienced by women in the downtown East Side is further exacerbated by COVID-related restrictions, which have reduced the number of safe spaces for women. Advocates are calling for an immediate task force with all levels of government to ensure the safety of women. The Liberal government needs to show leadership and lead this work. The lives of women depend on it, as our collective humanity hangs in the balance.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, from December 7th to 10th, MAS, the Quebec Network for Unemployment Rights Groups, has been holding a week of regional action to call for an in-depth reform of EI. The Quebec National Unemployment Council is also holding a campaign for Resolution AE21 to call for permanent reform of the system. Throughout Quebec, these groups and unions are urging the government to reform the current system. There are many problems, such as eligibility or the lack of harmonization with the Quebec Parental Insurance Plan. All of this justifies an in-depth review and not just some band-aid measures. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois stands in solidarity with this cause and calls for in-depth, significant review of the EI system.
Honourable member for Carleton.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Then came Scrooge's call through the PM's headset. "You owe me repayment of the national debt!" But Scrooge, Christmas is for Santa and cute elves, candy canes and budgets that balance themselves. "No," snapped Scrooge, "Santa's in debtor's jail till you pay. I'll leave him there and ruin Christmas Day. I need cash in a flash," cried out JT. "Perhaps speaking fees for my friends at We. The central bank will make our dollars double, reducing by half my money troubles. Doubling the number of each coin will make us more, turning loonies to toonies and toonies to 4. Each party will chip in some coins for free. If it's loonies we need, they're in the NDP. We'll host Liberal fundraisers, social distance, no doubt. That's easy enough. Liberals are always spaced out. Meanwhile, at North Pole was a plan underway to set Santa free and save Christmas Day. Out of a helicopter, an Air Force vet ran, a dashing and handsome, slightly balding man. Goodness, asked St. Nick, who's this man on a mission? My gosh, it's the leader of the opposition. The leader cut the bars and set Santa away, who wasted no time and ran straight for his sleigh. But as he jumped on, a reindeer did buck. Santa stubbed his big toe and yelled, "Oh, shucks." Then off and the chariot went. Up it soared, our children's dreams renewed and also restored, proving again Christmas dreams can come true as Santa and all turn their colors to blue.
The Honourable Member for Mount Royal.
For a slightly less partisan Christmas poem. 'Tis the last sitting week before Christmas for this virtual House. Instead of coming to Ottawa, MPs are home with their spouse. Using a new cloud platform, never leaving the room, House meetings or committee, it all happens on Zoom. Making speeches of brilliance, winning each dispute, only to realize that you were on mute. Working for your constituents, fighting for grants, wearing shirt, tie, and jacket with no need for pants. For MPs, tackling a virus has become the most important of tasks. We've beseeched all Canadians to wash their hands and wear masks. With the Team Canada approach, there is no I or me, for Parliamentarians 2020 has been all about we. We've worked together on programs that have made all the news. Millions of Canadians have used CERB, CECRA, and CEWS. In this crazy environment, division is something we cannot afford. Politicians must come together, like Freeland and Ford. Si Saint Nicolas envers nous sera plus ou moins sévère.
Saint Nicholas could be severe with us or not, based on the various behaviors of the different parties, with their different colors. I fear that the only ones to really win his approval will be our pages. The opposition keeps asking for more information about this virus. But what we want from Christmas is that we finally get a vaccine.
For something, it is clear what that would be, a return in 2021 to real normalcy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the wage subsidy was supposed to help workers stay employed. It was supposed to help small businesses keep their doors open. Instead, we've learned that it went to padding the bottom lines of 68 of Canada's largest corporations. How much money did this government spend subsidizing corporations that didn't lose a penny during COVID-19?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will get to the question in a moment, but allow me to begin by thanking the doctors, the researchers, the scientists at Health Canada and elsewhere who worked tirelessly over the past many weeks and months to approve the first COVID-19 vaccine, safe and effective for use for Canadians today. This is a big deal, Mr. Speaker. It is a good news day for Canadians. We will see 30,000 vaccines begin to arrive next week, with many more on the horizon. But we are not through this yet. We've got a tough winter to get through, and I know we're going to be able to get through it together.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the vaccine is great news. I agree with the Prime Minister, and I appreciate him voting for our motion to have a plan so that Canadians can see that. I want to add to his thanks the Canadian Armed Forces, who helped our long-term care. We learned recently that Extendicare received $82 million from the wage subsidy at a time the Canadian Armed Forces took over their facility in Toronto, meaning Canadians were actually paying shareholders while the Canadian Armed Forces were cleaning up the corporate mess. Why did the Prime Minister pay millions for a job that the Canadian Armed Forces ended up doing?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning of this pandemic, we made a promise to Canadians that we would have their backs. And that's exactly what we did. We delivered on a CERB that helped Canadians with replacement for their paychecks. We delivered on a wage subsidy that supported businesses, small and larger, to be able to get through these difficult times. And Canadians pulled together. We've continued to be there with PPE and now with vaccines, with rapid testing, and with other things that have worked directly with the provinces. We will continue to support Canadians as necessary so we can get through this pandemic.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Clearly put conditions on companies when it comes to dividends and share repurchasing in exchange for loans. Spain and the Netherlands built restrictions into their wage subsidy program. Once again, the government couldn't be bothered to do basic due diligence. Will the Prime Minister commit to reforming the Canadian emergency wage subsidy that it only benefits those in the break room as opposed to the corporate executives in the boardroom?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, while Conservatives are talking about limiting and being careful and holding back on spending and criticizing us for having gotten money out too quickly to too many Canadians, we knew that during these unprecedented times, we needed to get money into the pockets of Canadians, into the bank accounts of small businesses as quickly as possible. And as we've said, we are verifying things on the back end. We're making sure that people didn't take advantage of it, but people who made good faith mistakes, Mr. Speaker, will not be penalized. Our focus during this year has been to be there for Canadians, and that's what we've done.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But the Prime Minister is penalizing average Canadians and helping major corporations. The government changed the criteria for the CERB so that people who took home more than $5,000 before taxes are now being assessed on their net income instead of their gross income. The website mentioned nothing about net, Mr. Speaker. Even after the changes, it still doesn't. Why is there one set of rules for Canadians working hard and struggling in the unemployment line and another set of rules for connected corporate liberal insiders?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
From the very beginning, we were clear on getting support out to Canadians. The rules did not change, but we've indicated to Canadians that we will work with them if people made good faith mistakes. We know that during this unprecedented time, we needed to be there for Canadians, and that is the choice we made. Now, the Conservatives have said we shouldn't have delivered as much money to Canadians as we did, but I know there's a lot of Canadians who look back on this year and understand that because we were all there for each other, it was a much less bad 2020. We're not going to call it a good 2020, but a less bad 2020 than it otherwise would have been.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, we're living in a country where privacy protection is a fundamental right. Young people today are victims of traffickers. They're vulnerable. Those people are disclosing content without consent. C11 could be amended to protect personal information. Is the Liberal government prepared to protect these vulnerable people in our society? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have been working tirelessly to protect vulnerable Canadians, and that includes online activities. We're going to move forward with regulation that will ensure that online platforms withdraw or remove all illegal content, whether it's hate speech or exploitation of minors or any other violence or terrorist activity. And we will give our authorities the tools they need to protect the most vulnerable.
Beloy-Chambly.
The Honourable Member for Beloy-Chambly. That's quite a welcome. Mr. Speaker, in an unprecedented and historic act, 6 premiers of Quebec wrote a short and clear letter calling for the Charter of the French language to apply to federally regulated businesses. They're joining with the unanimous voice of the National Assembly of Canada and the Bloc, and we're not so sure about the member for Montreal, but will the Prime Minister support and vote for the Bloc's legislation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. our two official languages are at the very foundation of our country. We will always defend the uniqueness of the French fact in Quebec and all across the country. We will defend both official languages for those living in minority language situations, and we have tabled legislation to protect languages on the web, and we will strengthen the Official Languages Act. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Quebecers and all their former premiers know how they want to protect French. On another matter, the Prime Minister will be meeting with the premiers. Is he going to go into that meeting with an attitude of confrontation and interference, or will he present a proposal that might meet the Premier's demands without any interference or strings attached? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Bloc Québécois is always trying to pick a fight, but we have been getting along very well with the premiers for months. We've transferred resources to them to the tune of billions for healthcare. We've provided them with PPE, rapid testing, and now vaccines. We will be there to work with the premiers and the provinces to protect the health of all Canadians, and we will keep doing that.
South.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government gave $1 billion to big business, and those companies gave $5 billion to their shareholders. But the Liberals don't want to penalize those companies. The people they do want to penalize are the workers and artists who applied in good faith for benefits. Why are the Liberals protecting the ultra-rich and penalizing workers and artists? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we've been there since the very outset to help Canadians who lost their job because of COVID-19 with the CERB, with the wage subsidy for small businesses. We were there to help people through the very hard times of this pandemic, and we will stay there. We will keep supporting companies and workers, our seniors, our young people. We know that the pandemic is not over, even though vaccines will begin arriving next week. We need to stand up together to get through this winter.
Government are literally going after self-employed and artists. They're literally doing that right now. This government spent $1 billion on companies that turned around and gave $5 billion in dividends to their shareholders. Yeah. 2 of those were long-term care homes, which had some of the worst conditions for residents and seniors. Why didn't the Liberal government make sure that all public money was going to protect vulnerable seniors and residents of those long-term care homes?
Yeah. Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member referred to artists, and yes, indeed, as a government, we have acknowledged how hard our artists and creators have been hit by this pandemic with a lack of audiences to share their work with, their art with, and that is why, in addition to the CERB, we've provided hundreds of millions of dollars in additional support for them, and we will remain there throughout this pandemic so that we can all celebrate together at the end of the pandemic.
I have no doubt that the reports of young girls being abused and those acts being recorded and then viewed millions of times online disturbs all of us. When I read about it last weekend, I was shocked, and frankly, I was disgusted that it was happening right here out of Canada. I think all of us were. The Prime Minister was informed of this last March, and I'm wondering if he can tell us why he didn't, at that point, begin the process of stopping these images from being portrayed and viewed all around the world. I'm wondering why he didn't start doing something back in March.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been working for many years to fight child exploitation and abuse, and that's why we continue today actively working to create new regulations to require online platforms to eliminate illegal content, including hate speech, child sexual exploitation and violent or extremist content. Our approach will ensure that illegal content is removed quickly, that platforms are monitored, and that victims have access to a fast, transparent, and independent process. We're working with our international partners as well, and we intend to introduce these regulations at the earliest opportunity.
Member for Portage Lisgar.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're hearing that these porn sites themselves are going to start verifying the content, but I don't think any of us have any faith in these porn sites. Their goal is to make money, clearly not protect women and girls. None of us want this abuse to continue. We all have sisters and daughters. The government has said that they're going to introduce legislation next year, but I'm asking the Prime Minister, is there something that he can do today to protect our nation's daughters, to do something for them, not next year, not in a few months, but today, to stop this online abuse from happening right here in Canada?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past years, we have stepped up on our fight as a government against abuse, against gender-based violence, against exploitation of minors. We've continued to put forward measures that protect all Canadians, particularly women and girls, and we will continue to do that. Working with the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality, we've put forward many programs to support, and as the member opposite says, there is much more to do, and we look forward to getting the support of all parties in this House as we move forward on strengthening measures to protect all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has shown that the provinces have substantial health demands. They need more resources. The Prime Minister will be meeting with the premiers tomorrow to talk about health transfers. Is he prepared to do like our leader and commit to providing stable, predictable, and unconditional funding for our provincial partners? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the very beginning of the pandemic, we have been there with the provinces and territories to protect Canadians, to invest in the healthcare system. From the very beginning, we transferred $500 million more, including 2 record transfers this year. And later, with the Safe Restart, we added another $500 million. In total, Mr. Speaker, that's $25 billion that we've transferred to the provinces, in addition to rapid testing and PPE, and now in addition to vaccines. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, in his last economic update, the Prime Minister tried to throw the provinces a bone by announcing $1 billion for long-term care facilities. $1 billion with a whole bunch of unacceptable strings attached. That is purely and simply federal interference. The provinces can manage their own funds. Has the Prime Minister lost confidence in the provinces? And is he unable to commit to stable, predictable, and unconditional transfers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the lives of our seniors and their dignity has no jurisdiction. It's also part of the federal government's responsibility to protect our seniors all across the country. We are working with the provinces, in partnership with the provinces, to deliver a better healthcare system to Canadians. And those systems will protect Canadians better, unfortunately, than we've been able to with this pandemic. All Canadians expect all seniors to be protected wherever they live across the country, and we will be there to work with the provinces on this.
Gary.
Mr. Speaker, 5 years ago and counting, the Prime Minister promised to end the blood ban against gay and bisexual men. All parties are united in ending this outdated stigma now, not in months or years. More than ever, safe blood donations are needed urgently. The Canadian Medical Association and the All Blood is Equal campaign have the science-based, safe solution that simply changes a questionnaire to ask about sexual behavior, not sexual orientation. Will the Prime Minister finally keep his promise and put an immediate end to this discrimination?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we got elected in 2015, we made the commitment to end the MSM blood ban, and we are working forward towards that. We dropped the ban from 5 years to 1 year and further dropped it to 3 months, but we needed to do that based on science. Unfortunately, under the Harper government, the blood services were starved of the research money necessary to do the work, and therefore we funded them to do the scientific research necessary to be able to eliminate that blood ban altogether. That is our goal, and that is what we are going to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, my friend and colleague had a very reasonable question on the discriminatory blood ban against members of the LGBTQ community. The Prime Minister has made this promise several times over the last few years, but like many things, there's never action. There is science, and there are several other countries following this procedure and ending discriminatory bans now. Will the Prime Minister answer with a serious question with a timeline to live up to the promise he made 5 years ago?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the deferral period was reduced from 5 years to 1 year. In 2019, it was further reduced to 3 months. We have funded 15 projects to find the evidence necessary to eliminate it altogether. We will continue to work with Canadian Blood Services and IMOC Quebec until we cross this finish line, which is in sight. But I'm very pleased to see members opposite standing up for the rights of the LGBTQ community. I just wish they would talk to their members who continue to stand in favor of the barbaric conversion therapy. It would be nice to see the Conservative Party stand with the LGBT community for once.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, Pierre-Marc Johnson, Daniel Johnson, Lucien Bouchard, Jean Charest, Pauline Marois, and Philippe Couillard. The only female premier and all living premiers in Quebec history have joined with the National Assembly in calling for the Charter of the French language to apply to federally regulated businesses in Quebec. The Bloc Québécois has tabled legislation to that effect. Will the Prime Minister heed the call of all Quebec premiers and commit to supporting our bill? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're waiting to see the bill that the Quebec government is going to table at the appropriate time, and we will work with them to protect the French language. That is a priority to the Liberal Party of Canada and always has been. We announced in the throne speech that we would be there, not just in the same way that we've always been to protect Francophone minorities all across the country, which the Bloc can't do, but also to protect the French language within Quebec. And we will be there wholeheartedly to ensure that our beautiful French language is protected. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Blah, 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 blah. Empty rhetoric. For 13 years, the Bloc has been calling for Bill 101 to cover federally regulated companies. Surely the Prime Minister's had time enough to make up his mind by now. Today, all the premiers in the history of Quebec are calling for this to happen, and all of Quebec's labor unions have climbed on the bandwagon. The unanimous National Assembly, the House of Commons, everyone's calling on the Prime Minister to take action. Will he extend Bill 101 to federally regulated companies, yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, blah, blah, blah. That's all the Bloc can do, Mr. Speaker. We are here to act to protect the French language, and we will always be there. We have committed to choosing only judges for the Supreme Court who can speak French, something the Conservatives have not even committed to doing. We will continue to defend the French language and work together with the government of Quebec when they table their legislation. We're looking forward to seeing it, and we will work together to meet this challenge of the decline of French in Quebec.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, the House passed a motion calling on the government to make a decision on Huawei by Friday, December 18th. The motion isn't binding at law, but it is binding in a moral sense. Will the Prime Minister respect Parliament's will, and will he make a decision on Huawei by next Friday? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, 5G technology will meet an explosion in demand for faster and higher speed and higher capacity networks. And Canadians look forward to taking advantage of the latest innovations of 5G technology. But security will always be our top priority, and we will never compromise on matters of national security. We are continuing to make sure that our Canadian networks are safe and secure, and we will continue to work with our experts in order to move forward appropriately.
It's not about how great 5G is. It's about respecting democratic norms. This Prime Minister talks a good game about respecting democratic norms abroad. He has said, quote, Canada recognizes the critical need to strengthen democratic norms in institutions around the world. The PM talks the talk, but he doesn't walk the walk here at home. He fails to uphold democratic norms here at home. He has ignored the call by this House to list the IRGC as a terrorist group. Is he also going to ignore the call by this House to make a decision on Huawei by next week, Friday?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, particularly in this time of pandemic when everyone is turning towards digital and online activities as essential for staying connected, we will continue to ensure that we're listening to the best advice of our scientists and experts and national security advisors in terms of making the right decision to keep Canadians safe while giving them access to the full range of digital opportunities. That is what Canadians expect of us. That's what they expect of all of us in this House. We look forward to working together to ensure that that happens.
Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, first we were going to have a decision on Huawei before the election. Then we weren't. Then we were going to have a new framework on China. Then we weren't. All the while, Canada's national security is being threatened, and Canadians are being harassed and intimidated by China's foreign influence operations here on Canadian soil. When will this government get its act together on China, respect the will of this House, and come forward with a robust plan to counter China's foreign influence operations here on Canadian soil?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 2 years, 2 Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, have been detained arbitrarily by China, and Canada has done absolutely everything necessary to try and get them home safely. We will continue to hold up our principles, our values, and the rule of law as we defend Canadian rights, as we push back against China's coercive.
What's the problem? Is it with the interpretation?
Okay. So, can I ask, is it working now? Interpretation's functioning? L'interprétation.
Is the interpretation working now? Okay. Okay. The Right Honourable Prime Minister had finished, so the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Chinese regime is abusing our citizens, abusing our security, abusing human rights, abusing the rules-based trade order. This week, the European Union passed their Magnitsky Act. This week, the United States added 14 more Chinese officials to their sanction list for the creation of a police state in Hong Kong, where 300,000 Canadians live. That brings 29 officials to the list sanctioned by the U.S. The number for this Prime Minister is 0. When will the Prime Minister finally show a serious and principled approach with respect to Communist China at home and abroad?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the course of the last 2 years, we have worked tirelessly with allies and partners around the world on holding China to account for the arbitrary detention of 2 Canadian citizens. We have pushed hard, and we've seen allies in every corner of this planet speak up in the defense not just of Canadians, but of the fundamental rule of law that protects us all around this world. We are going to continue to work closely with our allies, particularly in the Five Eyes, to push back against China's coercive diplomacy in a way that benefits Canadians, that upholds our values, and protects the opportunities we have around the world.
Honourable Member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians who followed the rules and applied for CERB in good faith are now getting repayment demands from the government. My constituent Carol is self-employed and made less than $10,000 last year, but the government says her net income was barely too low, so now she owes them $14,000. Meanwhile, the Liberals are letting at least 68 large companies who got millions in government aid pay out that money as dividends to shareholders. So why do the Liberals always help the rich but keep Canadians like Carol in poverty?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we knew in this pandemic we needed to support Canadians, and that's exactly what we did. We rolled out in record time supports to Canadians across the country with the CERB, with the wage subsidy, with supports for seniors, for youth, for families. We're going to continue to be there to support Canadians. Now, during that time, there are people who may have made good faith errors. They will not be penalized for that. We needed to make sure we would have Canadians' backs, and every step of the way, we've been there for them.
Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, currently there's a proposal at the WTO to waive intellectual property provisions that could frustrate the COVID-19 vaccine rollout across the world, and Canada has so far stood against that proposal. Instead of helping big pharmaceutical companies protect their bottom line, the government should be putting the needs of people first. We need to do everything we can to ensure the safe, timely, and affordable delivery of as much vaccine as possible. The WTO TRIPS Council meeting is tomorrow. Will the Prime Minister commit to finally supporting the waiver to ensure people and not profits are the focal point of decisions around vaccine production and distribution?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we knew that you cannot end this pandemic anywhere without ending it everywhere, which is why even as we were securing a larger range of potential vaccines than any other country, even as we were securing more doses per capita for Canadians than for any other country, and even as we are now seeing vaccines roll out to Canadians as early as next week, we've not forgotten our obligations to the international community, which is why we've stepped up with the COVAX facility, with the ACT Accelerator, with measures that will ensure that as vaccines become available, they become available to the most vulnerable around the world as well. We need to vaccinate billions in the coming years. We will help.
The Honourable Member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The opposition has said Canada is at the back of the line for vaccines. And a member of the party opposite is even sponsoring a petition questioning the safety and the effectiveness of vaccines. And the leader of the opposition refuses to denounce his comments. Earlier this morning, they were proven wrong. Can the Prime Minister please update the House on the government's plan to get Canadians a vaccine for COVID-19?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank the member for Newmarket Aurora. Mr. Speaker, we reached a critical milestone in our fight against COVID-19 today. Health Canada approved the first vaccine for COVID-19. Regulators worked around the clock to complete a thorough independent review. This vaccine is safe and effective. We will have 249,000 doses by the end of the month. An initial shipment of 30,000 doses will depart for Canada this week, arriving at the 14 shipment points across the country as early as Monday. We're working with and thank the Canadian Armed Forces who are ready to ensure Canadians get vaccinated as soon as possible.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, on June 30th, Air Canada cancelled 30 regional routes with no follow-up plan from this government. On October 14th, WestJet cancelled another 5 regional routes with no follow-up from this government. Yesterday, Air Canada cancelled another 5 regional routes with no follow-up plan from this government. Mr. Speaker, these routes are important not only for the communities, for the aviation workers, but for Canadians who rely on their services. When will this Prime Minister deliver on his promise to restore Canada's regional routes?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, air sector workers are hit hard by this crisis, and we continue to support them with our programs. We're very concerned about Air Canada's decision to suspend additional regional routes in the Atlantic. As we are developing a package of assistance for the Canadian airlines industry, I can assure Canadians that before we spend 1 penny of taxpayer money on airlines, we will ensure that regional communities retain air connections to the rest of Canada and that Canadians get their refunds. We know that this is not a time for traveling right now, Mr. Speaker, but when we get to start traveling again, we know that our air carriers need to be there for all regions of this country.
Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Yesterday, we learned flights to airports in St. John, Sydney, Fredericton, Charlottetown, Deer Lake, and Halifax have been reduced or cut entirely. For months, the Transportation Minister has said a plan is coming. Today, the Prime Minister says he's concerned. That's not good enough. We're 9 months into this pandemic and air travel is going the wrong direction. My constituents in southwest New Brunswick, which now has 0 service out of St. John, as well as thousands of others in Atlantic Canada, want to know what the Liberals are going to do to keep airline travel running down east.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, given this pandemic, there are not a lot of Canadians traveling in the Atlantic bubble or elsewhere across the country. And airlines have made decisions that are concerning not just for now, but for the future as well. We are ensuring and working with them to ensure that regional routes are restored as soon as necessary, as soon as possible. And indeed, we will not be supporting the airlines with sector-specific support until they are assuring us return of regional routes and return the refunds to Canadians.
For Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday residents of the South Okanagan were shocked to find out that Air Canada is canceling all flights to the Penticton Airport. Those that rely on this airport do not have access to a government jet like the health minister, and they certainly don't have the luxury of waiting for months as this government dithers and delays. Mr. Speaker, will this Prime Minister do something now, or is he telling the residents of the area that they should go fly a kite, because they certainly won't be flying?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have worked with sectors hard hit by this pandemic from the very beginning, including over $1 billion to airline workers across the industries to support the important air travel that it will be necessary once this pandemic is over. We have expressed over the past many months our concern about suspension of regional routes, and will continue to work with airlines to ensure support and protection of regional routes, particularly once we get through this pandemic and want to start traveling again. But as I said, no sector-specific support will go to the airlines until they return refunds to Canadians and until they show us a plan for restoring regional routes.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister Mackenzie King once said Canada is a nation with too much geography. This Prime Minister seems to agree, and he's failing regional markets from the Okanagan in BC to Atlantic Canada. The government has failed to roll out a rapid testing strategy at airports that would allow some of these regional routes to remain open. The federal government is responsible for the certainty of air travel that binds this country, Mr. Speaker. How many Canadians are going to be stranded on the tarmac waiting for this government to act?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we hear the Leader of the Official Opposition going on about rapid testing, when the fact is he's been talking about it all fall, when over 2 months ago, Mr. Speaker, we sent rapid tests to the provinces in the millions. In regards to the travel, we have over the past many weeks run a pilot project with our friends in the government of Alberta to ensure that we can see the impact on rapid testing on quarantine times, and drawing from the data that we get from that, we will make further decisions about how to best keep Canadians safe as they seek to travel once again.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, Quebec has just recorded 1,728 new COVID cases. Healthcare workers are already overwhelmed, and soon we'll be asking them to do even more because they will also have to be managing the vaccines too. It's healthcare personnel on the front lines fighting this crisis, and it's also them who will get us out of this crisis too with vaccines. We have to support them, not turn our backs on them. Will the Prime Minister join Quebec and the other provinces to announce an increase in health transfers in a significant and lasting way? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're in the midst of an unprecedented crisis right now, and during this crisis, we have been there at every step for Canadians and for healthcare services. We were there with historic transfers of several billions of dollars, and we were there for PPEs and for quick testing, and now we are there to help with vaccines. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to sitting down with the premiers tomorrow to discuss everything we're doing together to protect Canadians now and looking to the future as well. The Honourable Member from Montcalm. Healthcare transfers need to be greater. All the provincial premiers will be meeting with the Prime Minister tomorrow to ask for an increase in health transfers. They had to cancel Christmas. They had to shut down thousands of companies. They had to announce to millions of people that they would be losing their jobs. They had to cancel operations and stop cancer screening. These are unprecedented measures because this is an unprecedented crisis. Will the Prime Minister take this into account and finally increase health transfers in a lasting and significant way? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to correct my honourable colleague. This year we transferred tens of billions of dollars additionally for the healthcare system in partnership with the provinces. And next year, we are going to be transferring another $42 billion extra for healthcare systems. But in this crisis, we have gone beyond what has ever been done in the past to help provinces to ensure the safety and health of all Canadians. And we will always be there to ensure the health and safety of Canadians. That's what Canadians expect of their federal government, and that's what we're going to continue to do. The Honourable Member for Richmond, Arthur Beska. See former Quebec premiers of all political stripes support the National Assembly's statement saying that Bill 101 should be applying to federal jurisdictions, companies under federal jurisdictions in Quebec. Even unions are asking for this. All the opposition parties agree with this request in this House. We're just missing one person to be in support of it, and he's in front of us now. How come the Prime Minister does not support the request of all former premiers of Quebec and all the people I've just mentioned? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. As I said, Mr. Speaker, we're waiting for the provincial government in place now to table legislation on this. We're going to look at this, and we're always going to work with them to protect the French language like we've always done as a party. But I don't have any lessons to learn from the Conservatives, because could they commit today to, for example, appointing bilingual judges to the Supreme Court? How come they refuse to do this? Are they going to rise to talk about this now? Or perhaps they could commit to only speaking French, appointing French-speaking judges to the Supreme Court like we did. It's incredible to hear this Prime Minister who's not able to, well, in addition to the director of the party in Quebec and almost all the members who are speaking against Bill 101 right now, we learned that the formal Liberal member sent a letter to the media saying that he's also against federal companies under federal jurisdiction being subject to Bill 101. The Prime Minister should say clearly in this House that he agrees that companies under federal jurisdiction in Quebec should be subject to Bill 101. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, as I predicted, Mr. Speaker, they're saying nothing about the fact that we think that Supreme Court judges should all be able to speak French. The Conservatives are not there to protect the French language. They're there to play petty politics. We are there to protect the French fact across Canada, including in Quebec, and we're going to continue to work to defend minorities and the beautiful French language across our country. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. 6 former Quebec premiers signed a statement showing their support to Bill 101. People from different political backgrounds, and they are on the same page. Mr. Speaker, it's rare that Mr. Charest and Mr. Bouchard agree on something, and that is the position of our party as well. What is this Liberal government waiting for to allow for an extension of Bill 101 to bring federal companies under federal jurisdiction? We're waiting for legislation from the current government of Quebec. But once again, I've just given them 3 opportunities to pronounce their opinion on Supreme Court judges. They refuse to commit to appoint only French-speaking justices to the Supreme Court of Canada. You want to see what they think about the French fact in Canada and bilingualism? Well, there's an example. The Liberal Party will always be defending the French language.
Cumberland Colchester.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I first bring warm regards from Nova Scotia. And I want to congratulate the Prime Minister on Canada's first vaccine approval announced today. So while this is very good news, rapid testing is also very important to stop the spread of COVID-19. And I know my constituents here in Cumberland Colchester would very much appreciate hearing about the availability of testing upon possible exposure. So could the Prime Minister please give us an update with regards to ensuring Canadians have access to rapid testing? Thank you.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Cumberland Colchester for the question and for her exemplary leadership during this extremely difficult year. Testing is one of the most important tools we have to respond to COVID-19. We've already authorized 6 rapid test response kits to date and deployed over 8.1 million of them to provinces and territories. To ensure that these tests are put to best use, PHAC also released guidance for provinces and territories on best practices. We've been there for the provinces and territories every step of the way, and will continue to support them in delivering on their responsibilities for healthcare.
Member for Kenora.
Mr. Speaker, municipalities across Northern Ontario have been waiting over 100 days to find out whether they will receive funding through the Community Investment Initiative to support economic development. The department claims to respond to funding applications within 80 days, so I raised this issue to the minister 2 weeks ago, but as of this morning, we are still waiting for an answer. So can the Prime Minister tell us when these municipalities can expect to have a clear answer on the status of their funding applications?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Over the past many months, we have worked to flow unprecedented funds to provinces, to municipalities, to communities and organizations that have needed extra support because of this terrible 2020. The COVID crisis has caused us all to need to pull together and work together, and we have been there for municipalities, for Indigenous communities, for rural and remote areas, for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We will continue to work with them to ensure their applications get processed as quickly as possible. For any further help that they might need, we will be there for Canadians. That's a promise we've made. That's a promise we've kept.
Honourable member for Kenora.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that was a classic non-answer from this Prime Minister. I asked a question about the Community Investment Initiative through FENNOR. The Prime Minister didn't respond with using the words FENNOR, the Community Investment Initiative, economic development, or Northern Ontario, Mr. Speaker. So I will give him the opportunity to answer the question again. When will Northern Ontario municipalities expect to have a clear answer on the status of their funding applications?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think if the member opposite checks the blues, he will see that I actually said that the applications are being looked at as rapidly as possible, and we will work with them for any extra funds that they need. In the meantime, speaking of regional development agencies, I was extremely pleased to highlight that in the fall economic statement, we recognize the need for a specific regional development agency for British Columbia. Now, in addition to the tremendous amount of support we give through Western diversification, we will be able to give more support in addition to that directly to BC to ensure that regional development agencies have the tools to best support people on the ground right across the country. This is a good day for regional development across the country and will continue to be.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, our economic recovery has to be about how we create jobs and in the process get our resources to market. The proposed Alberta to Alaska rail link can play a vital role in increasing market access for Canadian resources and creating jobs in Yukon and across the Northwest. Indigenous leaders are championing this project, but we can't get a straight answer out of this government. So, Mr. Speaker, is this government going to support the Alberta to Alaska rail link? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we receive a detailed project, we will look at that project. That is how these things work. We no longer in a time where someone can simply shrug and decide, I'm going to throw a railroad across the country and then get it done. We instead are going to work with interested groups, work with proponents of the project, and make sure that it is done the right way. Conservatives might try to take shortcuts all the time. We are focused on getting things done right so they don't end up in the court years down the road. We believe in developing the economy of this country the right way, in partnership with Indigenous people, in partnership with environmental concerns. That's exactly what we will do.
The Honourable Member for Marc-Aurèle Fortin. Mr. Speaker, throughout the pandemic, our government has done an outstanding job of ensuring that Canadians have access to essential personal protective equipment. We saw at the beginning of the pandemic that it was very difficult to ensure that we received N95 masks, face shields, gowns, and other PPE that met the standards. There were supply chain issues and an unprecedented level of demand as the entire world sought this equipment. Can the Prime Minister give us an update on the PPE that we brought into Canada and sent to our provinces and territories? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank the member for his question and for his hard work. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had to face many challenges to acquire PPE. And we rose to the challenge by negotiating contracts for the purchase of more than 187 million N95 respirators, face shields, millions of facial surgical masks, and deliveries continue to arrive every day. We promise to protect the health of Canadians, and that's exactly what we're doing.
For Churchill, Kiwatanuk, ASCII.
Mr. Speaker, no community has been harder hit in Canada by COVID-19 than Shamattawa First Nation. 291 confirmed and many more potential cases, an 80% test positivity rate. I reached out to the ministers again yesterday. I appreciate a reconnaissance mission is heading in today, but this nightmare scenario is getting worse by the hour. And this is happening in Canada, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So will the Prime Minister do whatever it takes to save the lives of the people of Shamattawa First Nation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of the pandemic, we said we'd always be there to help those in need, and that's exactly what we're doing. The Minister of Indigenous Services confirmed support from the Canadian Rangers to Chief Redhead of Shamattawa this weekend. We've heard the call for more support, and an evacuation of vulnerable community members has already begun, with efforts underway to increase the isolation capacity within the community. We will be there for them. And speaking of being there for them, because this is the last question, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to thank all the pages, all the House of Commons staff, and everyone who've been there for us through this very difficult year. And to you and your colleagues, Mr. Speaker, thank you all for an extraordinarily difficult but successful year in this House of Commons.